Hello everyone. So while doing my research I came across this chart and it was absolutely mind-blowing. I had no understanding how much money has flown into non-productive and non-viable companies, and they now make somewhere around 20% of all the companies in United States. Prior to dot-com bubble, as you can see, there was hardly any zombie companies, and only once the money spigots were opened, in a way quantitative easing started. The number of companies started to increase, and it's kind of become an exponential chart now, as this number was just mind-boggling. So I thought maybe I will do my own research, see pull some numbers, and see if, because of a GFC sort of crisis or Great Depression type of crisis, once the money spigots shut down, what will happen to the people who are employed in these companies, and the impact to the unemployment. So yeah, let's get started. The all the data comes from Federal Reserve. Here is the link. Now I'm not gonna I made a very long PowerPoint detailing lot of data. I'm not going to go through it all, so let's just focus on the areas pertaining to calculation of people employed and impact to them. So first chart is this. This kind of indicates from 2015 to 2020 how many companies were publicly listed and how many were private in the US economy. So on an average about 10% private companies were zombies, and somewhere around 5% were publicly listed. Oh, I apologize. 10% were publicly listed and 5% were private. This is a bit long term. So this goes all the way from 2000 to 2021, and the reason why the Federal Reserve starts it from around here is because prior to dot-com bubble there were hardly any zombie companies, and it started increasing only during the dot-com bubble, and then every recession they will increase, and then in the normal growth period they will decrease. According to Fed, I did some correlations there. That statement isn't correct. In fact, it's disingenuous. The real relationship is when Federal Reserve expands their balance sheet, and which actually happens during the recession, because during the recession they see problem in the economy, so they start pumping the money. So the number of zombie companies are able to get cheap liquidity to keep them afloat. The number of zombie companies increase, and then in the other times they start decreasing, as you can see here. Again, this is the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, and if you see the relation, when every time the balance sheet increases here, here, and here, the 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 zombie companies increase, and then if the balance sheet is decreasing or even flat, the number keeps going down, and then during the pandemic crisis they have started increasing again. These are different measures to calculate the zombie companies by Fed, by financial press, and by academic researchers. According to Fed, about 10% publicly listed are zombies, and about 5% private companies are zombies. But if you look at other measures, the numbers are even higher, and they have been explained here. So if you can pause the video and have a look. So according to financial press, their criteria is ICR has to be below 1, and the firms have to be mature. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the maturity means at least 3-year-old or 3 year in existence. And then academic literature, low ICR requirements, but high debt, and they rely on bank credit for debt servicing. And according to Federal Reserve, not only they have to borrow money for debt servicing, but the future growth prospects are also very low. So in other words, less revenues in future also to pay back or service the debt. So pretty much making these companies non-viable. This is the distribution across the industries of these type of companies. Zombie companies primarily are into manufacturing in the as far if they are publicly listed. They are into other areas like mining, construction, wholesale trade, and retail and transportation, but not a lot. In case of private zombie firms, they are more concentrated in retail and wholesale trade, and the other areas there is some manufacturing as well, but other areas not as much. Let's skip that. This is a very key data point. Publicly listed companies are about $400 million in size, whereas private companies, zombie companies, are about $25 million in size. And this is a good data point that will help us do some calculations. This you can relate this also with this chart here, because the publicly listed manufacturing companies, not publicly listed, but manufacturing companies require a lot more capital expenditure and capital, and they employ a lot more people also. So this kind of goes on to show why they are so big in size, whereas mom and pop shops, they are much smaller in size, and hence they employ a lot less employees as well. Duration of zombie companies, just quickly touching on that. A lot of these zombie companies may last up to 7, 8, 9 years. 80% of them exist only for 3 years. But why can they last for this long? Reason is because companies do still exist even while they are going through bankruptcy. So yeah, it's kind of misleading that they actually last that long. Let's not go through that. This is a good this is good charts to give an idea how they are going to impact the economy and the banking system if these companies go kaput. And if you notice, somewhere around 7% of the loans or bank loans are tied to zombie companies in 2015. They have reduced to about 4%, but still significant of money is tied to these zombie companies, and they are non-viable, and basically all that money is non-performing. Similarly, about 4% of the credit or bonds were associated with zombies, or that's how they were borrowing money. It has reduced significantly, so that is definitely positive. The interest rate distribution is around 0 to 15% for zombies versus the distressed non-zombies. But again, this is a distribution, so if you average it out, this is, I think, the slab that indicates the average interest they are able to borrow money at. And if you notice, there is significant overlap. So if you notice, this is following somewhere, at least even the distressed non-zombies are borrowing money somewhere around 5 to 7.5% interest rates. Let's not go through that. Main takeaways, let's quickly touch them. So according to Federal Reserve, their main assessment is that zombie firms, defined as non-viable firms with low growth prospects that survive on cheap credit, are not an important feature of the US economy. I'm not sure how they're claiming that. Totally disagree. If you see the first chart that I showed earlier, about 20% conservatively are zombie companies, and as I was showing you earlier, during the recessions they increase, and we have been kind of in recession, or going to be in recession very soon, as soon as Federal Reserve start hiking these interest rates and shut down the liquidity spigots. So the numbers are going to be growing, not reducing. But even if we go by Federal Reserve's numbers, about 10% of publicly listed and 5% of private companies are zombies. So that's not small by any shape or form. If you see from history, the chart I showed earlier, before 1999 there were hardly any zombie companies. US banks not only have limited credit exposure to zombie firms, but they also lend to zombie firms at terms suggesting an elevated assessment of credit risk. Again, don't agree with this. About 4% of bank loans and 2% of bonds are invested in zombie firms. So if you do some math on that, I don't have number on top of my head, but total bank loans are what, 20 trillion now, and 4% of that would be pretty significant amount, about $800 billion. But I will have to, don't quote me on that, I'll have to confirm that. Similarly, the credit or the bonds are what, 32 trillion, maybe even more. 2% would be again big chunk. And if I recall, the subprime crisis was created by what, 600 billion or 557 somewhere odd $billion of subprime mortgages created the GFC crisis. So that kind of gives you the idea, just that level of non-performing assets created the GFC. What would this do? Assuming these numbers coming from Federal Reserves are right, I mean, usually they would underestimate the numbers that don't go in their favor or interest. Also, they are mentioning elevated risk assessments. Again, as I showed from the chart here, there is a lot of overlap with non-zombie companies. So while the distribution is pretty large, it's hard to say that it's significantly higher to indicate that risk assessment covers or ensures that some recovery is possible. Alright, so now coming back to how this can impact the employment if a GFC type of situation happens. Now what you see on the left hand side is all the companies that or the firms that exist in US in respective years, and the number of employees in that respective category. So in the total number of companies in 2019 with less than 5 employees were 3,878,675, and employees with 10,000 and more were 6,033. Now, as what I have done here is to created 2 categories. One is, you can say, for publicly listed companies, because they are on an average size of $400 million, and then private companies which are 25 million in size. So I did some research to find out what is the average employee strength of a company with 400 million. I have my own experience working for one such company, actually 2 such companies, and I can share that. But overall also, somewhere around 200 to 400 employees for a company of $400 million in size. Actually even more. The one I worked for was $200 million in size and had employee strength of 650. It was an IT company. Now, so here what I've done is I have picked this category. So somewhere so 100 to 500 employees, there are about 131k companies. If we go with 20% zombie companies, so somewhere around 262,000 companies are zombies. But I'm not going with higher numbers. So like I gave you example, the one when I worked for was only 200 million in size but had 650 employees, and these are all 400 million plus companies. But I'm going with very, very conservative number of 100 employees per such company. So we come up with 2.62 million people who are employed by these zombie companies in the first category. But even if we go with the Federal Reserve's estimate, where they are saying only 10% of companies are zombies, not 20, then we get 1.31 million people associated or working for zombie companies. If we go with financial press or academic research numbers, those are way higher. Those are 25% and even higher. So these numbers can be even way higher, but we're just going with, let's say, Federal Reserve, so about 1.31 million. Now for the private companies, those are $25 million in size, and for that I have only picked these small companies, which are these. So anything less than 100. So I sum them up for year 2019. By the way, all these data are for 2019, just to pick a slice and give an indication where things stand. It can be extrapolated to this year or next year. So less than 100 employee, about these many total companies altogether. 20% of, if we go with the first chart, 20% of all private companies are zombies. Then about 1.253 million companies are zombie. And again, going with a very conservative estimate of about 20 employee per such firm, we get about 25 million people associated with these zombie companies. Now, if you notice, this 25 million figure kind of makes sense also, because all the small enterprises, small and medium enterprises, um, make about 70 to 80% of total employment. And if you do a math, 25 times 5, because this is only 1/5, is 125 million, which kind of gives a very accurate number. If you consider altogether about 150 to 155 million people are employed in United States, so somewhere around 80% falls in this category, or sorry, some falls in that number, that range. So this kind of gives a right figure, right indication. um, but if we go with the not with the 20%, with just the Federal Reserve's estimate, we come up with 6.625 million people associated with private zombie companies. So bottom line is, if GFC sort of situation happens, and let's say 20%, and there is no further money printing, and there is deflationary crisis, somewhere between 25 to 30 million people potentially can become unemployed, and that would be catastrophic, because 30 million is going to be somewhere around um, 20 to 25% of total employment in United States. Quite insane number. But even with the Fed Reserve's estimates, 6.6 plus 1.3, 6, 7, 8, so 8 million people will be gone. That also is very high number. And if you guys recall, according to Federal Reserve estimates, in GFC we lost 8.8 million people. So employment lost was 8.8 million, which kind of is matching with this also. Now, these are extremely conservative estimates, and some of that employment that was lost in GFC recovered, because money spigots were open, liquidity was flowing, and growth came because of that. It was all kind of standing on the crutches of Federal Reserve's liquidity pumping, but nevertheless it came back, and some of it recovered. But if there is a deflationary crisis, there is no doubt in my mind these non-viable companies are not going to be coming back. In fact, lot more viable companies in today's category, or as per today's measures, will become distressed and fall into the non-viable category as well. So if anything, these numbers will be more, not less. So yeah, that's what I wanted to share with you guys, that what potentially can be an impact on unemployment if 2007, 8, 9 type crisis happens again. I skip a lot of, some of the material here, so let me know if you want me to go through that. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one. Bye.